Okay. I'm thinking we should get started because I see that we've hit some sort of baseline here in terms of people joining in, and hopefully more people will tag along. So apologies to the audience for the confusion this morning with the passcode. I didn't realize that there was a new requirement for that, and that was obviously omitted. So apologies from my end, but this will be recorded, so you can always check out the recording as well, and we'll make sure to make Chris's contact details available. And Chris, hopefully it's okay if people reach out to you if they've got any follow-up questions as well.
Yep.
So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speaker. And so our speaker today is Christopher Baker Bryan. He is the managing director of the product division at Bboxx. And he will be talking to us today about Bboxx's mission to build a next generation utility for Africa. Chris is one of the co-founders of Bboxx and currently based in London. He leads the development of a wide range of advanced rural and electrification solutions, as well as a range of software products to support Bboxx's growing global operations. He also oversees supply chain operations across Asia and Africa. And before we started the webinar today, we were talking about how unique of an experience that must be to do all of this in the middle of COVID with the travel restrictions in place. So it's a truly remarkable job that he's doing. Chris graduated from Imperial College. He received his MEng degree in electrical and electronic and electrical engineering. And I should know how to say that since I also got the same degree at the same time. So we know each other from back in the day. I'll briefly just mention that the other two founders, Mansour Hamayoun and Laurent Van Hoek, are also Imperial College graduates, and the three of them, while they were both all three were students, started a student charity called Equinox, which allowed them to bring electricity to Rwanda, to a few parts of Rwanda, and then grew that operation into transition that I should say perhaps into Bboxx. But Equinox still operates today as a student charity, and I think is also a very successful student effort. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Chris, and we look forward to hearing everything you've got to say today. Thank you very much for joining us.
No problem at all. Thanks, Spiro. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. And yeah, just to echo what Spiro said there, I think it was 15 years ago that we met at Imperial College doing our undergrad together. So that puts a timestamp on a few things. And great to reconnect and share our experiences over the last decade on this mission to build a next generation utility for Africa. In terms of what I'll cover today, really it's about these key points. So I'll talk to you a little bit about the off-grid solar market. What is it? How has it developed? How has it grown? A bit about Bboxx and how we've grown and developed alongside that over the last decade since we left Imperial College alongside Spiro back in 2010. A little bit about our research and university partnerships. I think maybe for the audience here, it might be interesting to tell you a little bit about some of the areas that we're investing into and looking at, battery trends, socioeconomic research, improvements on the hardware side and the platform in order to scale up and support this operation across Africa. And some of the key trends that you might be interested to know about in this market. It's an emerging market. A decade ago, it didn't really exist. And over the last decade, it's grown to now be a 2 billion a year industry, which Bboxx is one of the key players involved in this sector, and also how you can get involved if you were interested to know more about it. Some of the challenges for the next decade that we foresee in bringing electricity and utility services to the rural and off-grid populations of the developing world. A bit about Spiro's already done a very generous introduction, so I won't spend too long on this, but a bit about us. So myself, with a bit less hair there now due to COVID than we used to have, and my co-founders Mansour and Laurent. We started Bboxx back in 2010 off the back of a student-run charity that Spiro mentioned there whilst we were studying at Imperial College together in London. And through those experiences and the exposure that we had there, we set up a student-run charity back in 2008, which was the forerunner to Bboxx, and as Spiro said, is still running and still, I think it's sent now over 100 students over the last decade to do research projects in Africa and East Africa in particular on energy access, on other utility services. I think their latest project is on a rural washing machine for East Africa. So there's some innovation happening there, which it still persists today. And really through those experience running the charity for a couple of years, we saw the need and the demand, the growing global demand that we saw for access to energy solutions in this part of the world. And with the media coverage that we had through the charity, we decided to flip this into a business in 2010, and have been running and scaling it ever since then. And today, where we are now, is we produced over 500,000 and sold over 500,000 energy systems to off-grid households across various parts of Africa. We have about just under 900 full-time employees now, and about 4,000 sales agents that work for us on a daily basis in countries as diverse as Senegal through to Kenya and everywhere else in between across the continent of Africa, as well as some growing operations in developing Asia, and also our central teams in places like China for manufacturing, London for software and hardware development, and other parts of the world as well. So yeah, a growing operation that we've nurtured over the last decade, and that's also been one of the challenges, as Spiro said, particularly in the last year, of coping with a very diverse workforce in many locations around the world, and the inability to travel. So this webcam has been well used in the last 12 months to communicate with them. This is a quick picture of our first thing that we ever did prior to Bboxx. We set up these energy kiosks back in 2008 as part of this charity, really to try and provide a solution at the time to what we considered to be one of the world's biggest challenges. And actually today it remains one of the world's biggest challenges that is not talked about so much, and maybe rightly so in the last 12 months. But the access to electricity and energy solutions, at the time back in 2008, there were close to 2 billion people who lacked any access to electric power around the world. And we consider that to be one of the world's greatest challenges, because energy access is really the fundamental route towards improving livelihoods, productivity, and the economies of these countries. So back in 2008, this energy kiosk solution was the first thing we came up with in order to try and tackle this big problem. The idea behind it was a battery charging station powered by solar panels on the top and battery storage units inside, where customers could come to this small hatch here, and they could put one of the battery box units, and that's where the name Bboxx comes from, if you're wondering, into this kiosk, get a freshly charged battery box, and take it back to their household. And the reason for this was, at the time, solar panel prices, battery prices were so high that it didn't make a lot of sense to have individual standalone units on customers' houses, but to centralize generation. Over the last decade, many things have changed, and in particular, market trends which I'll show you in a minute, on solar panels, batteries, and also the ability to pay using mobile money platforms has really developed and grown over the last decade. And that means now that it makes a lot more sense to decentralize even further the solutions that we provide. So individual households now have off-grid solutions on their own individual houses, and are able to access and pay for that in small monthly installments. But a lot of things that we learned from these charity projects back in 2008, and it really formed the basis for the development of Bboxx over the next decade. Just to take a step back maybe and talk a bit about the market challenge and why we exist and what the numbers look like today. So today around the world, there's over 800 million people who lack any access to any electric power, and the vast majority of those are in Sub-Saharan Africa. On top of that, there's an additional 1 billion people that suffer from unreliable power supplies. So this might be regular power cuts, regular interruptions during the day or night. For example, the city of Goma, where we have a big operation in the eastern DRC, on average gets 4 hours of power per day. So if you try and imagine running a business on that sort of power supply, it's obviously very challenging and very difficult to do so. So these are the two key markets that Bboxx has been trying to tackle, predominantly the one on the left-hand side here, people who have access to no power over the last decade, but in the last 2 or 3 years have started to expand our product range into systems that cater for the unreliability side of things as well. And really this is why Bboxx exists, is to try and eliminate this by the end of the decade, alongside other industry partners and people working alongside us. Just to give you some context, when we first started the charity, as I said, back in 2007-8, there was close to 2 billion people that didn't have any access to electric power. So those numbers have come down quite considerably over the last decade, but still a very long way to go. A lot of people still need access to electric power to charge lights, power radios, access content on TVs, or use it for productive use to improve their generating income potentially from using electricity to power certain devices. So lots of opportunity here still in the next decade in order to make a difference here. And as I said, we consider this to be one of the world's biggest unsolved challenges that really is fundamental to the development of many different solutions that come off the back of this. Bboxx also in the last 2 or 3 years has expanded our remit beyond just electricity to cover other utility services. And that's why I talk about in the title, building a next generation utility service, because it's not just electricity access that is key for development, it's also access to other vital utility services that people need. So for example here, access to clean cooking. We spent the last 3 years piloting, testing, and now starting to scale access to clean cooking solutions using the technology platform that we've built for solar to be applied towards that. Access to clean water. We just announced last year Africa's largest agricultural water pumping project alongside the government of Togo in one of our operations there. And then other things such as access to financial services, access to the internet as well are big unsolved challenges that, well, you may be aware of. The access to internet problem has been trying to be tackled by the likes of Google and Facebook with a number of their initiatives across the continent. But really for us, it's the next generation utility vision is about leapfrogging traditional technologies. How can we go from systems that used to require cables, pipes, and wires, and leapfrog that, because it's particularly difficult in the operations and the locations that we operate in order to provide those traditional methods of utility service delivery. So how can you deliver water pumping without necessarily the infrastructure that goes with that, access to gas for cooking, or access to other services, the vital utility services. So that's really what Bboxx is now about, is about much broader range of utility services. And although traditionally we've been focused very much on electricity in the last decade, the next decade is about our growth into these new areas to tackle these other big unsolved challenges. And really that's just summarized here, what I've just said. Our mission of our business is to transform lives and unlock potential through energy access. And that's why we go to work every day. That's what we get up and try and achieve. We describe ourselves, as I said, as a next generation utility. And today, after 10 years in business, we have about 2 million people that we've impacted through our solutions over the last decade. So still a very long way to go to achieve those numbers that I set out on the previous slide in terms of the number of people who lack access to any electric power. But Bboxx, alongside its partners, we hope we can make a significant impact on that over the next decade. A bit about our customers and where we operate, just so you get a sense of who we serve and where we do so. So we operate a retail network traditionally in East Africa, but has since expanding into Togo and into Nigeria and West Africa. We also have third-party distribution partners that we work with around the world in other markets. But typically all our customers are spending between $5 and $25 a month on some sort of existing energy expense. And that might be kerosene for lighting, it might be candles, dry cell batteries to power torches, or many other types of legacy technologies that are often harmful for health within the household, or are expensive, or people have to walk for long distances in order to get them. So really our business is to try and transform the lives of people who are using those existing solutions and provide them with a next generation utility experience, a service delivery which is transformative for them and their household. This is a great example. This is one of the first customers we ever had back in 2011-12. It was one of the very first prototype products sat up on the shelf there. This shows you an image of what our customer base is like. They are typically off-grid, rural, traditionally farmers. Most of our customer base are in agricultural services or similar services to that. This shows the sort of transformative effect that a solution like this can have on the household, the ability to watch TV throughout the night, access to content and information which they previously couldn't have been able to achieve. And also I particularly like this picture because it invites the chickens in to have a look at the TV picture here. So this is one of the first images, very first customers that we installed back in 2010, and now we have, as I said, over 2 million people who are reaching or accessing our solutions now on a daily basis, getting access to content, ability to charge your phone, read at night, study at night, do work late into the evening, access content on TVs, and in some of our larger solutions, run things such as laptops, productive use equipment, fans, and so on, water pumps for other services. Quickly, if I was to go outside that house, this is what I would typically see. A village like this one, where you don't see any traditional infrastructure, you don't see any wires or pipes or cables here. This is one of the marketing events that we would have typically run, or we do typically run during non-COVID times. As you can see, people are a bit closer together now, and that's not necessarily allowed in our markets at this moment in time. But that's a pretty classical scene of how our operations are expanding. Going into we have a network now of some 160 shops across various countries around Africa, but interspersed between those shops, running events such as this one to generate demand, raise awareness of the systems and the solutions. And typically this is the sales pitch that would take place on the right hand side. Someone would come up to a potential customer and would look at how they're spending today on energy solutions, so kerosene for lighting, or paying someone to charge their phone at the nearest grid point, or accessing other vital solutions like batteries and candles, and looking at how Bboxx's solution can potentially reduce that expense, provide a better experience, so you can press a button and turn the light on within your home, and you don't have to walk down to the nearest grid point to buy kerosene in a small container and burn it in your home at the expense of the health of the people inside the house. So many sort of things like that is transformative to the experience of the end customer. And this is some examples of the end customer studies that we do to understand the impact that it has on their livelihoods. So here you've got this customer in the northern province of Rwanda who's talking about the impact that this sort of solution can have on their experience, on their life. And again, many several million people now experiencing this on a daily basis with Bboxx, but also many tens of millions of people using off-grid solutions around the world. And in particular, the growth over the last decade has been in part due to other technology solutions that I mentioned, so the reduction in batteries and panels, and the access to mobile phone technologies as well, which allows people to pay in small installments, allows our products to be remotely connected through the mobile network, so we can monitor their health and we can understand the status of those units, and then provide updates and responses if something goes wrong. Quick overview. So we have this platform, as I mentioned, that we were enabling to see all of the operations globally. So this is I grabbed a quick screenshot this morning from the map that we have on our platform, showing the distribution of our products across the continent. So you can see here, the individual dots, represent the density of products in those locations. So you can see a lot of products in East Africa, around Rwanda, Eastern DRC, and Kenya, but increasingly larger numbers of products over in West Africa, in the likes of Togo and other markets there. So quite a lot of growth that we've had over the last decade, and really this is our core market here, Sub-Saharan Africa. Average energy access rates across this market is lower than 40% for households, and so this is really the market that we focus on as part of our main solution. And if I was to drill down, you can see a little bit more detail on East Africa, the coverage we've got there in Kenya and Rwanda, and if I was to drill onto Rwanda in particular, you can see here how we've got national scale coverage on some of the markets that we're in, Rwanda, Kenya, Togo in particular. We're starting to generate significant scale there and be a key part of the population, the access to energy targets for many of those governments. So, for example, in Rwanda, we provide close to 10% of households in the country with access to energy. It's quite a substantial figure, given that we only really started scaling operations in Rwanda in 2012-13. And we've contributed quite a bit to their national electrification targets over the last decade. Quick bit on our global footprint. So these are the main countries we operate in Africa, where we have our retail businesses. This is where the bulk of our teams are and our employees. So we have, as I said, just close to 900 full-time staff and about 4,000 sales agents that pull on a cap or a shirt for us every day and go to work in those markets. And those are the markets that we have. We are expanding and we're growing, and we're hoping to announce several additional markets later this year that we'll be expanding into. So COVID dependent and travel dependent, it's been a bit more tricky with the last 12 months to expand into new locations, as you can imagine. We also have operations in China for production, obviously in the UK where I'm based for software development, hardware development, and also small offices in Paris and in Pakistan, where we have development and business development teams, engineering and business development teams. In terms of the impact that we've had, and some of you may or may not be aware of the Sustainable Development Goals. You may or may not have heard of those, the SDGs. They were set in 2015 by the UN to be achieved by the end of this decade, by 2030, in order to resolve a number of different challenges. The most obvious one where Bboxx contributes is the access to affordable and clean energy, as you can see there. That's the key one that we clearly contribute to, but many others that we also impact. Here's some of the numbers that we've achieved to date. So I think there's a couple of months out of date now. So I think we're at 1.85 million people that we've provided with access to electricity over the last decade. And you can see there some statistics on carbon emissions savings, number of people improving their livelihoods by undertaking more economic productive activities. And also things like access to improving the lives of school children who can then study in the evening using these systems. And through our platform, we can actually see how much energy has been generated and consumed by our customers. And on a day-to-day basis, it's about 16 megawatt hours through these distributed solutions that's generated and supplied to our customers. So on the grand scheme of things, these are small numbers. And obviously, the average household there is consuming far less than your typical household in the developed world. They need a very much smaller amount of energy in order to access these solutions. Our investors, we've not not done this on our own. It's a big operation, and we've had to bring on partners in order to achieve these goals. So some big names there that you may or may not have heard of in the energy space. EDF, one of the largest utilities in Europe, and Engie, also a large global name in the utility space, alongside Mitsubishi, who led one of our investment rounds in 2019. They led our Series D investment round back then. So they have a keen interest on expansion into Africa and expansion to next generation utility type businesses, alongside other names there that you may or may not have heard of, some specialist investors, smaller players. Kostler Impact, Vinod Kostler was our first investor. First investor back in 2013, and he led our Series A round, and he unlocked and helped unlock a lot of additional capital beyond that. And to date, about $250 million is what we've raised globally to date through these network of investors here and others that are not listed on here. And the challenge is that over the next decade, in order to achieve those numbers of people, even further amounts of capital will need to be deployed and unlocked in order to accelerate energy access for the remaining tens of millions of people that don't have it. And it's important that we work alongside these type of partners to do that. Just quickly, I wanted to talk about how and why this sector has developed at the rate that it has over the last decade. And we like to think there's some skill and some knowledge involved in this. From our side, there was also a lot of luck in terms of timing. And I think the key three things that have enabled this sector to really progress over the last decade, which I'm sure many of you may be aware of. Number one is around access to mobile money solutions and IoT technologies, which have enabled these systems to really be deployed at scale across parts of the continent of Africa and elsewhere. So the ability for people to pay in small installments is really critical for our business model. We take about 1 million individual transactions a month across our customer base at the moment. Typically people paying in installments in about $2.50 to $3 is the average payment size that we typically take. And mobile money payments have really enabled the growth of these micro businesses, these small pay-as-you-go businesses over the last decade. The Kenyan GDP, for example, about 50% of its value goes through mobile money solutions. I think that was the figure from 2018. And you can see that there's a huge reliance and dependency on these type of solutions now in order to make payments in small amounts for solutions such as ours. Coupled with that, as I mentioned previously, decrease in solar panel and battery technologies have also enabled systems to be more affordable for customers and for larger amounts of power to be provided at a reasonable price. So this has typically been driven by the on-grid storage and generation market in the developed world, and also the electric vehicle market in the last few years, driving down lithium-ion battery prices. This is the latest forecast from Bloomberg New Energy Finance, if anyone follows them, to get information on market trends in this space. And you can see here, the rapid reduction in over the last 5 years in the price of lithium-ion units, and the forecast continued reduction over the next few years. And actually, all the forecasts that they set, I think this was back in 2017, all of those forecasts have been, beaten by several factors over the last few years, thanks to the growth of mainly the EV market in the US, Europe, and in particular in China. So that's really why this sector has developed. As I said, we've had some skill in getting the business to where it is today, but also a lot of other supporting factors. And really, it's the last decade there's been a lot of sector trends that have helped us to progress and scale this business to the level it's at, and also will help scale this business over the next decade. What do we provide? Maybe just to highlight a few key things. So this is one of our key solutions that we provide to our customers. This is our BPAR20, one of our smallest products. So this is an energy storage unit which is mounted on the wall of a customer's home and provides information to them about the amount of power and energy they have available to use. It allows them to plug in devices, small lights, phone charging, radios to power those during the day and night. And this is sort of really one of the key products that we've built alongside others that are slightly larger than this to power larger TVs, fans, and so on. The customers experience a range of appliances, so the energy storage unit is nothing without the actual technologies that they can power. And so, actually the most popular one on there is our shaver, which probably I need to use at the moment, but it helps people run a small business. We've sold over 40,000 of those in the last 18 months in places like Rwanda and Kenya, because people use that to then generate a small income in their small business that they might be running, which helps them to then repay the system and generate income off the back of that. So income generating activities are extremely important. Running a small TV in your shop or in your location helps to bring in people that might otherwise not have done so, helps to generate income, which helps you repay the system and build the lives of the people that are dependent on that. And then a few other things, we've built a pretty comprehensive software platform to help run this operation. It's no mean feat dealing in locations like this one. It would be very challenging to have a team manually door to door collecting payments from customers, giving them notifications about if they've paid or not, and dealing with any service requests manually. So the platform that we've built is really to help this business scale. So all of the different aspects that go into running a next generation utility business. So all of the remote diagnostic work that's needed, proactive maintenance, alerting, call center systems, payment management, notification services to our customers. All of those things, we've had to integrate and build into what we call our Pulse platform, which is really the heartbeat of our business. As I said, we take about 1 million payments a month through that platform and handle over 500,000 products and services that are distributed through that. So it's quite a big operation. All of our sales agents and technicians use that on a daily basis to understand their performance, and it's really the key aspect. And one of the key things that we're investing in is to make sure that platform can scale over the next few years. When we go from 500,000 customers to 5 million, or from 1 million payments a month to 10, this system needs to be able to cope with that, and that's one of the big investments that we're making. Maybe diving into some more interesting topics, technical topics that might be interesting for you to know more about. So one of the key things that we do at Bboxx that's maybe a little bit unique and is quite interesting for research partners as well, is to use our telemetry data that we have from all of those 500,000 units to help us manage and improve our operations. So here you can see on the top right, one of our traditional units that we've had for the last 5 or 6 years. We're starting phasing out this design and replacing it with the one you previously saw. But off the back of this unit, it has a mobile phone. It has a SIM card and a modem inside it and an antenna, essentially the core components of a mobile phone in it, which allows it to communicate over the mobile network in those countries. So you can get back great data like this one. Here I took a snapshot again from our platform for one unit this morning. You can see here, charging and discharging of the battery unit within that product. So you're going to see here, daytime generation and then nighttime usage. These sort of square blocks here showing usage patterns, running a TV or running lights off the back of that. You can see temperature variations in the country, and you can start to then infer from all of that data things like, okay, I can detect if that battery potentially is in a low state of charge or low state of health, and I can provide alerts to either the customer or technicians to help them proactively manage that fleet of systems and make sure the customer has a great experience. So they, if the battery is in a low state of charge or low state of health, they may have issues with that, in the future, and we want to prevent them from having a poor experience. So we proactively message them or send technicians or call them in order to get them to come in to swap that battery for a replacement. And you can then infer usage statistics as well, such as what it shows on the lower part here. You can start to then, with machine learning, decode that this waveform here into its component parts and understand what people are using when, and then use that to look at their usage and usage patterns, their daytime usage patterns, nighttime usage patterns, and see if there's any opportunity to upsell or cross-sell new systems to them. So a number of things that we do using our telemetry data, and this is actually one of the most interesting areas that we're encouraging research partners and others to get involved in. And we feel that there's a lot of opportunity here using this data set that we have to really understand how we can optimize our operations, and there's a lot of really unique learnings that you can get out of the back of this. Other areas of research that we've done, this is one of the partnerships we've had with Oxford University in the UK for quite a while, looking at forecasting our battery state of health. So a lot of interesting things on the right hand side here, but basically we're sponsoring PhD students there in order to help understand, based on those billions of data points that we gather, how can we then predict and forecast when batteries might fail? Because that's a key thing for us in a remote distributed business like ours. Any battery failure means someone has to go out and replace something, or someone has to bring it in, and there's downtime involved. So we want to be able to predict if that might happen, when that might happen, and when a customer we can then proactively either replace or ask a customer to bring a unit in to a shop in order to have it replaced. And then prevent them having an outage sometime after 3 or 4 or 5 years when the battery potentially has an issue. So this is one example of a research project that we've been working on alongside some academic partners, and there are many other examples like that we're looking at as well, with not just Oxford but other universities and other research partners around the world. And on the more socioeconomic side, we also have partnerships with the likes of University College London in the UK, where we again, I think we sponsored 4 PhD students there over the last 5 years to track and understand usage patterns and behaviours of customers and see what their demands are and how their lifestyles change before and after getting access to these solutions. So that's been a key part of our customer research as well, which feeds a lot into our new product development and how we can then improve the products and services that we're delivering to our customers. Again, this is one partnership that we have with UCL, but there are many others that we've built and developed with partners around the world, academic and other industry partners, to help us do this. And then really just finishing up, and I think we have then about 15 minutes or so for questions, if there are any. So just a quick summary of this sector. Really, we've seen some significant reductions in certain trends over the last decade. So component prices for the manufacture of solar lighting products has significantly decreased over the last few years, and we hope will continue to do so. Mobile phone penetration, has increased, which has increased the demand for solar charging, but also has also increased the penetration, the coverage of mobile phone coverage in those markets. And we expect, as governments change their policy behaviors, as the clean energy agenda becomes more prominent in those locations, that the subsidies that were traditionally in place for kerosene and other fuels will start to be relaxed in some of those markets. And that will mean that those prices will increase, and the gap between traditional energy solutions such as kerosene and other carbon solutions and our solutions will start to become even larger, and our solutions will become even more competitive in those locations, which will drive adoption as well. And actually, just generally, we are seeing governments starting to respond quite actively to this. I know when we started a decade ago, there were no governments on the continent of Africa who had any idea or clue about off-grid energy or thought it could have any impact on their population. They were just all about grid expansion and getting people to connect to the electricity grid, which is a great thing in theory, but when you realize that it costs about $2,000 a connection, and it takes on average 3 years to get someone connected, it's not the most particularly economically affordable or time-sensitive method of expanding grid connections. So over the last decade, we've seen a number of governments adopt new off-grid policies. So the markets that we're in, there's a clear government policy in almost all of those markets to engage in the off-grid solutions. And how can you guys get involved if you are interested by what you've heard and would like to know more? There are a lot of opportunities in this sector in general, not just in the technology space, which is maybe more for this audience here, but so here's one example of how can we build in the next generation of battery technologies into our systems in order to lower storage costs and improve reliability. So that's one example of how people can get involved in the off-grid solar space. But there's a lot of operations requirements to scale up our businesses. Policy work as well, and engaging with governments is a key area. And also the hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars of finance that we need over the next decade in order to expand these solutions to the range of customers. So lots of different areas for getting involved in, not just with Bboxx, of course, but with anyone else in the sector, government partners, policy partners, research partners. So a lot of exciting trends happening generally in this space. This market didn't exist a decade ago, and we hope by the end of this decade, it will be the dominant way of providing access to energy for people across the continent of Africa. So it's really an exciting time to be involved in this market. That was pretty much it from me. I think we've got 10 minutes or so. If there are any questions that you would like to ask, happy to put them in the chat window or the Q&A. I think the Q&A box has a few coming in. Yeah, more than happy to take those questions. And thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Chris. That was fantastic. Really, really interesting to see how you've grown this whole business since the start. Very, very impressive. I have a question. Actually, I'll probably just jump the queue quickly and ask. I am curious from the perspective of technologies. You mentioned battery technology, and you also mentioned mobile payments and mobile and remote sensing and IoT. I mean, what do you think is really the most critical thing here to make this successful? Is it the software and the data collection side of things and data analysis side of things, or are there innovations on the hardware side that would make this even more impactful or more successful?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's difficult to pick between those two. I think they are both equally important. I mean, in particular on the battery storage side, reliability and an ability to have longer lifetime units in the field at a much lower price point. Batteries are 40% of the capex when you deploy systems like this. So every dollar that you reduce there helps to make it more affordable and more accessible to new customers. So I think that is a key area, and again, with the trends that we're seeing, dominated by the EV markets, it's helping us massively to reduce our price points. But there's new technologies coming in there that we could look at and observe and see if they would also have an impact. So I think that's a key area. But for us, one of the key investments that we're making, because we recognize that as small little Bboxx, we can't have a huge impact on the EV as the battery market. That's for the likes of Tesla and others to make their trends there. So for Bboxx, the main investment that we're really making is in the software platform to help manage these systems. So digital payments is at the core of that. Again, a decade ago, there was no mobile money in Africa, no digital payment infrastructure, and now it's almost everyone has it, and it's become the most common form of payment on the continent, or particularly in East Africa. And we're starting to see huge trends in that area. Trends in understanding the data of our customers is also really important. One of the key things that we want to do this decade is about providing new services to those customers, access to water, or access to cooking gas, or access to other things that could be transformative for them. And the only way to sell those products to those customers is by knowing and understanding their usage of the existing products, so you can start to understand, okay, who's suitable for those products, who would be able to afford it, and who would demand that. So I think the data collection part and the mobile money part is probably for us, the most important thing that we can have an impact on, and is the area that we're most heavily invested in.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, so we've got some questions, good questions coming in here through the Q&A. I guess this first one is, what's a challenge you face for scaling the operation, and how has COVID required Bboxx to adapt?
Yeah, I think the two things that really, in terms of scaling the operations, that we really face is, number one, is access to good talent and people. That's incredibly hard to find on the continent, and we spend a lot of our time investing in people, training up people, nearly 5,000 people that work for us now, and more, and growing every day. And so that training is a huge part of our activity. We actually have our own dedicated almost internal university teams to actually train people up and bring knowledge to them. That's a huge part of it. So that's and you're in competition on the continent with the likes of the mobile phone networks, the governments, and the banks that typically tend to poach the best people. So that's really important for us, number one. Number two is access to finance. This sector has done okay in the last few years in generating awareness, but we need to go another 10x over the next decade in order to raise the amount of money that we need to scale these solutions. People typically see Africa as a difficult place to operate, and yes, it is, and a risky place, but there's also a lot of opportunities there, and attracting new investors that have the appetite to actually go into the market is really critical for us. So I would say those two answer that first part of the question. And then for COVID, so COVID has had a little impact on us over the last year, in particular in some markets where lockdowns were present, stay-at-home orders were in place, meant that we couldn't have our technicians get out onto the ground. Ultimately, every installation requires a person to go and put a solar panel on a roof and get close to a customer, and we couldn't do that in some markets for a few months last year. So that had some curtail on our operation. One thing we did to help support our existing customers was reduce a lot of the minimum requirements to switch on or to make payments for our products. So it used to be that a customer had to pay a minimum of 7 days, which is about sort of $3 typically to get switched on, whereas we reduced that to 2 days during the last 12 months. So that's enabled people to pay in even smaller installments to get even access to smaller amounts of energy if they could do so. And then how has COVID required Bboxx to adapt? I mean, globally, we have a team in China, and I've not been able to go there since January 2020 to see our operations there. So trusting in our people and our staff around the world to make sure we can scale our operations there, and certainly looking forward to things reopening hopefully in the next few months.
Absolutely. Do you see the other question, or I can read it out?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, I can. So the next question is around introduction of LED lights, and yeah, I mean that's an interesting question. I mean, so the main benefit for us of LEDs is clearly the power consumption reduction. You would not be able to run our existing solutions using slightly older technologies. The warmth and the temperature of the light is a big factor. Brighter white lights, typically liked by customers for security lights, as they call them, which are basically outside running all night. And then people like the warmer colors for indoors. So yes, we do offer a range of different lights there to suit people who prefer different color temperatures within the lighting. So you can adapt that, and there's something you can do within the LED technology. It's doesn't always have to be bright white, quite stark light. It can be different color temperatures. So yeah, we've done quite a bit of work on that with those customer research teams. What is it you prefer? Dimmable lights is also a key function for people to reduce the brightness in certain hours of the day. So yeah, there's lots of things that we've gathered from the on-ground research to help us feed into that product development. And then a question here, which one is a bigger challenge, technology or finance? Yeah, great question. I think there's still a huge amount of work on the technology front, to make these systems more affordable and more scalable. I think that's for me the exciting part of what I like doing at Bboxx, and given our background and where we've come from and the teams I look after, I think that's for me the really exciting one. I think finance is attracted by good developments. Finance comes to successful areas, and it is pulled in by interesting developments like this. So we are starting to see funds that would traditionally probably have never even looked at Africa in their life now starting to look at this as a real opportunity, because they start to see numbers and growth and movement in this space. And people that would have traditionally invested in developed markets in Europe or the US are now looking at this as a real growth opportunity. Because some of the markets that they maybe have traditionally invested in are a little bit stagnant and not growing at the rate that we can grow at. And that's the reason why the likes of EDF and Mitsubishi and Engie, those big names in the utility space, are starting to partner with Bboxx, because they're really excited by the growth opportunities that this presents, the access to new customers. For example, we just announced a few weeks back that EDF is partnering with us in Togo, and they're investing. They invested a further $18 million into that business back in January, because they see the potential for us to reach up to 2 million people in Kenya over the next 5 years. So that's really exciting for them, when their traditional markets are maybe a bit not exactly as attractive in terms of growth rate. So I mean, for me, I would say the technology leads and the finance follows. As long as you have good technology, that's really where things are progressing. But clearly, there's a lot of innovation still on the financial side in order to make sure the returns are there for those investors. Mm-hmm. And then a question here around, do you identify yourself as a charitable organization or a profit-making business? So we are there to make a profit. I mean, that's fundamentally at the heart of what we do. We are there to return money to those investors at the end of the day. However, we have a social impact mission at our heart. We were a charity. We ran a charity for a couple of years back in 2008. And without that understanding of the impact that these solutions can have and the transformative effect it can have on people's lives, I think a lot of that ethos still remains with Bboxx across all of our teams today. A lot of people join our organization because they want to make a difference. They may be tired of making, I don't know, some people come from the finance sector, have done things in that space and are not maybe particularly exciting or rewarding for them. But our business can combine many of those different aspects. So absolutely, we're there to make a profit. Without that, we don't believe this can scale. Without a commercial return, we can't make it a success. And we're getting there. As I said, we've raised about $250 million to date from investors in order to do this, and that's something that we hope will continue, and people will continue to put their trust in us over the next decade.
Great, thank you. I am curious here about the scope from the perspective that most of what you've focused on so far has been providing electricity and providing lighting and so on to domestic households. And I'm curious whether there's an opportunity to expand that, or maybe enable those same people to be able to use the electrification for their business. Let's say, for example, in the sector of agriculture. And I'm thinking about that because at NC State, one of the big things that the university does is interface with a lot of the agricultural industry in the state of North Carolina. And a big part of that has, from a research perspective, has been to look at how drones and machine learning and other things can be applied to enhance the productivity. So I wonder, if folks in the countries that you're looking at are, now getting electricity, can they then use that to leverage technology for agriculture or other businesses, and then help the commercial side of their lives as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think, so just a quick on the majority of our customer base is engaged in the agricultural sector. 80% plus of our customers are farmers or have some sort of subsistence farming They may also have another job, but it's a really important part of our operations, and understanding how we can support them is really important. So can we provide them with tools to see how their crop growth might be improved? How can we give them access? The water pumping project I mentioned before in Togo is all agricultural water pumping, so it's all about irrigation to improve the yields on smallholder farming. Again, you can pay. So the product we have there is an agricultural water pump, provides irrigation for about a 1 acre farm, and people can pay for that in installments over 2 years, and it's on a pay-as-you-go basis. So if you can pay, I think it's about $25 a month is the fee for that particular solution. And at the end of it, they own a solution which they can then use to improve their crop yields. So, I mean, any solutions like that can be transferred again from the developed world into the developing world. We're really interested to hear about that. Anything on the agricultural side that you guys are working on that you think could have applications here. Obviously, it may be slightly different context and slightly different area, but yeah, we were really interested to hear that, because that is ultimately our customer base is about improving the livelihoods of farmers. To then generate more income, so they can not just afford our products, but new products, and also improve the livelihoods of their household. So yeah, really interested to hear more about those solutions if you have any ideas.
Yeah, fantastic. I know that drone technology and sort of image processing and things like that are some of the areas that faculty and students are working on over here to help with the agricultural industry. And I have one maybe last question here to round things out, going in the other direction in terms of taking technologies that you are developing in the developing world and putting them in perhaps the developed world. Here in the U.S. recently we had this whole debacle in Texas with the grid and so on, and I do wonder, especially because Texas is a state that gets quite a bit of sunlight, are there opportunities for folks to have some of these solutions in their back pocket if they can't rely on the grid? I think you had a slide at the beginning where you were saying the different sectors.
Absolutely. I mean, there's absolutely an opportunity for off-grid solutions or grid backup solutions to be used. I think that the place it makes the most sense is when there is that arbitrage in terms of the grid price, right? So if you look at $1 per kilowatt hour for our solutions, we are expensive. We're in the $1 to $2 per kilowatt hour for our smallest solutions, when your grid price is in the tens of cents or lower. So when you start to have a convergence of those prices, then it starts to make more sense. So in developed area and undeveloped areas of Africa, or parts of kind of cities in Africa where grid reliability is so poor and grid prices are so high, in Rwanda it's close to 50 cents a kilowatt hour that you've got there for the grid price, and I guess I don't know what it is in the US, but it's probably south of 10 cents or 15 cents. So it's there it starts to make a lot more sense to have those types of solutions. But these things are improving year by year, and again, as battery prices reduce, solar panel prices reduce, these solutions are becoming a lot more competitive, and you can start to use these types of solutions in these areas. So I think over the next decade, you would start to see more of this type of system being deployed in more developed areas, and not just for backup solutions, but for other reasons as well. So yes, I think there is the opportunity to do that. We're not quite there yet, but it's getting to a stage where it's becoming pretty competitive, and I guess over the next 10 years we will start to see a bigger adoption of this in the developed world.
Fantastic. Cool. Well, thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate the talk today and for spending time answering questions with us as well. And I think we've gone through all the audience's questions as well. So yeah, really appreciate your time and appreciate the audience. And we'll make sure the recording gets posted and we'll distribute it so that folks have an opportunity to reach out and ask follow-up questions as well.
Thanks for everyone for listening in. And yeah, if you have any further questions, you can contact me on Twitter or email or whatever you'd like to do. So more than happy to do that.
Absolutely. Thanks again. I'll hang out here as well, Chris, if you want. Let me stop the recording.